Hello, I'm Jonathan Dunsky, author of the Adam Lapid Mysteries, and the topic of today's video is audiobooks, mainly the production of audiobooks. And I can tell you about it because I just finished recently producing the 7th novel in the Adam Lapid series in audio, and this concluded the process over several months in which I produced 7 novels and 2 short stories in audiobook format. And I learned a lot about the production of audiobooks during this process, and I think it would be interesting for you, whether you're a reader or a writer who's thinking of turning his or her books into audio, to learn more about this process and some of the challenges involved in it. Let me start by telling you why I decided to turn my books into audio, because for several years my books were not available in that format. And the reason is that the audiobook market is continually growing. More and more people are discovering audiobooks or turning to audiobooks, and I wanted my own books to be available to those readers. I just want to reach as many readers as possible, so I want my books to be available in whatever format readers are turning to. I'm also a big fan of audiobooks myself. I listen to a lot of them, and so I wanted to have my own books available in that format. So let's say you decided to adapt your books into audio. What is the first step? The first step is finding a narrator. And you can find a narrator in a number of ways. You can just Google, audiobook narrators and see what comes up. There are several Facebook groups of audio narrators that you can find talent there. And if you're a fan of audiobooks, you may already have a few favorite narrators that you think would be right for your own work, and you can reach out to them and see if they're available, how much they charge, and see if they are indeed a good fit for you. And there are also places where narrators and authors can sort of meet and work out a deal. One is ACX, which is sort of the production side of Audible. And there is also a marketplace on Findaway Voices where you can find narrators as well. I found several narrators when I was researching, when I was looking for narrators. I found a few narrators that I thought would be good for my work, and I reached out to some of them. Some of them were not available, they were booked months in advance, and I decided not to wait. And I had some of the others read samples for me from my own work to see how they sounded. And a few did not seem right for the role. At the end, I was left with 2 narrators, both of them good, and I found it hard to decide between the 2. So I reached out to a few of my longtime readers, let them listen to the samples that these 2 narrators had submitted, and had them vote on who they thought would be best for the role. And the narrator that I eventually went with, Dallin Bradford, got the most votes. So that's how I found him. One of the challenges that I did not anticipate when we began working on the audiobooks is in the realm of language. The Adam Lapid series takes place primarily in Israel, and there are a lot of Hebrew words and names, character names, street names, and these names are completely foreign to someone who does not speak Hebrew. And there are even sort of sounds in Hebrew in those names and in those words that are not common in English, and the narrator had some trouble pronouncing those names correctly. And we had to do a lot of corrections on the first book to get everything right. And so we came up with a way in which to work on the second book and onward to sort of reduce those errors. I would record all the names before the narrator started working on the books. I would send him the recordings. He would read them back to me so I could tell him, you're reading this correctly. And only then would he start working on the book. And this made things a lot easier. So if you have in your own work words, names that are not common in English, you need, or are not known in English at all, you need to record them for your narrator so he or she will be able to read them correctly. And so that was the main challenge that we faced. The other challenge, or the other thing that I did not anticipate, is that producing audiobooks takes a long time. And this has sort of slowed me down in writing new material. Because when you're producing an audio book, you need to, you become the editor. The narrator will read the book, and there will naturally be some mistakes along the way. Just like when you're writing a book, you will make certain mistakes, typos, grammatical errors, things like that. So you can expect the initial narration to not be perfect, and that's completely fine and reasonable. But you need to listen to the whole thing as you're reading the book and see that everything matches, all the words are correct, no sentences were mistakenly omitted. And this takes a long time because you can go through several iterations of narration and corrections and things like that. So what should you decide? Should you produce audiobooks? Well, for one thing, it's a personal decision, and I think it matters what your current status as a writer is, and of course whether you're someone who just wants to reach as many readers as possible, because audiobooks are not just time consuming to produce, they are also expensive. You're hiring a professional narrator who's an actor or a professional reader, and that person will charge professional rates. And there are several ways in which you can sort of set up the payment plan or the payment structure of audiobooks. You can either do a revenue share of some sort, in which the narrator gets a certain initial payment, and then he is entitled to a certain percentage of whatever royalties come in. And or you can just pay the narrator in advance, give him a deposit, and then when the book is finished, complete the total sum on which you agreed. And from that point onward, you, the author, as the person who owns the copyright, who owns the audiobook, will get whatever royalties come in. The way that you pay for audiobooks is by something called PFH, which is per finished hour. So it doesn't matter how long the narrator takes to read everything correctly, you pay by whatever length of time the final book turns out to be. And of course, each audiobook narrator will charge a different rate based on experience and whatever awards they may have won in the past. And you need to find someone within your budget constraints. But let's say that a narrator will charge, I don't know, $300 an hour, and your book turns out to be 10 hours long. So the audiobook will cost you $3,000, which is, of course, not a paltry sum. And you need to decide whether this is the right time for you to make this investment in your work, because it may take a while until you recoup this investment. So despite the hard work that producing audiobooks required of me, and the length of time that it took, and the expense, I'm quite happy with my decision of producing these audiobooks, of having them produced, because I like having more readers find my work, and some readers also read the work and then listen to the audiobook, and it's a completely different experience to read a book or to listen to it professionally narrated. And I like having all these options available to readers. I think it makes the books look more professional and more whole in a way, that they are also available in audio. So I do not regret whatsoever that decision, despite everything that went into it. The only thing that I'm sort of less happy about is that it took me away from writing new material, because I had to spend a lot of time working on these audiobooks. But this is something that I think in future audiobooks I will be able to do much faster, much easier and smoother. So And of course, I won't have to do 7 novels, one after the other. I'll do a novel whenever I finish one. So it should be easier. So I hope that this was interesting and that it taught you a bit about what goes into audiobook production. And thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.